All right, welcome everybody. We've got attendees rolling in as we just started our webinar. Want to welcome everybody. My name is Teddy Chestnut. I'm one of the co-founders of Bright Hire. I'm going to be your moderator for this conversation today around maximizing recruiting efficiency, how you scale talent acquisition without scaling spend. I'm going to let our awesome panelists introduce themselves in a sec, but I'm going through a bit of housekeeping and then just a tee up for the conversation. So this is being recorded, so if you got to step out, use the bathroom, go multitask for a sec, don't worry, you can come back and catch the recording. And we're going to be active in the Q&A. So there's an actual Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You can put a question in there. You can also just get into the chat and be super active that way. And if you have a question that's related, unrelated, we'll try to bring that into the conversation in the right spots and definitely leave time at the end. So just to tee this up, every TA team I think we've ever talked to in the history of TA is trying to do more with less. So some things never change, but some things change dramatically. Like the world, I think, is changing pretty amazingly at a rapid pace that we have never seen before with respect to AI. And so I don't know if you're like a one-person team going in hypergrowth, if you're navigating hiring freezes, if you're scaling an enterprise function, there's applications of AI across the board, and efficiency isn't really optional. It's kind of like mandatory. And I think the realm of what's possible is changing pretty dramatically. I just read an article about a sole entrepreneur founder who vibe coded his way into selling a business for $80 million in like 6 months. So like the realm of what's possible is completely transforming. And even though we're not all solo entrepreneurs using AI to sell $80 million businesses, we're still reinventing, I think, the function as we go. And so I'm super excited to have two amazing practitioners here today. Chris Shaw from Chainguard, Amina Darwish from Vercel. Again, I'll let you both introduce yourselves, but they are really pushing the boundaries and the frontiers of what's possible with respect to efficiency as they scale their teams. And I'm super excited to have you both with us today. Amina, Chris, thanks for joining. I'll start with you. Maybe you can give a brief intro. Your role, your function, a bit about Vercel, and then maybe as an icebreaker, like one thing you've used AI for in your personal life, not your professional life in the last month or so.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Really excited. So I'm Amina. I run our global talent team here at Vercel. We are actually in the AI space, so it's exciting to be here. And I'll do a little plug-in for our V0 product in just a minute. Vercel has been historically fully in the developer space, and so we are helping. We're rebranding to the AI cloud, but we were the front end cloud. We help our developers build and deploy their web applications. And then now using V0, anyone can build a web application. And that's how I've used it for my personal. Teddy, as you asked me, I built a itinerary for my best friend when I'm taking her for a girls' weekend. Vercel is around 600 employees today. We are hoping to grow to about 800 by end of year. When I joined last year, we were around 400. So we've grown quite significantly, and it's been a lot of fun. We are a global company, so we're hiring across the US, EMEA, as well as APAC.
Awesome. And what's the scale of your TA team and your people team?
So we have a mix of full-time and contractors, and we're about 25. And the
Cool.
team has recruiting operations, recruiters, sourcers. We're really focusing, we have somebody focusing on data, so it's across the board.
Great. It's always helpful to have that context with what you're operating with and how fast you've been growing. It's pretty exciting. Chris, over to you. A bit about you, your role at Chainguard, scale of the organization, and a personal use of AI in the last month or so.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Background wise, I've been at this a little while. Started in agency, did did about a decade there. Learned a lot, had to forget a lot as well. Then went into a very large environment at Google. So that's where I learned what a recruiting machine looked like at scale. Super fun. I liken it to getting a master's in recruiting at the time because they really knew their stuff. Uh, Got to go to Twitter after that when they were about 800 people. This is 2012 or so. I got to build the sourcing machine there. That was a lot of fun. And then since then, I've been really in startups. I did three Andreessen Horowitz startups, anywhere from 20 to 400 people. And now here at Chainguard, looking to grow from 400 to 700 this year. The recruiting team is about 14 right now, and we just added a rec ops leader and a sourcing leader. So I'm really excited to build this out with them. And for context, Chainguard, what we do is we make open source code safe. We make sure that there's no vulnerabilities and it cuts down on hacks before they can start.
Really cool. And personal use of AI, Chris, what have you used AI for in the last month or so?
Well, I've been here at ChainGuard about 2 months, and I was using I was using AI to help me prepare for my own interviews, to really understand what ChainGuard did at the time because I didn't. So I was able to do a lot of research. I was able to find talks, prepare myself, get to know the people I was going to be interviewing with. So that's where I used it.
On the safe side of the application of AI as a candidate, not as like the, hey, guiding me through the interview, telling me what the answers are as I run the interview. Maybe you're doing that too. And, maybe you think that's also cool. Who knows? A topic of conversation for a different webinar. We're
Exactly.
here to talk about scaling and being super efficient. And I guess, do more with less. You could do that in so many different parts of a recruiting operation. Uh, I'm curious when you think about we have limited bandwidth, we're growing fast, looking to double or grow by 50%, and we're trying to drive efficiency. There's so many different parts of the funnel or the workflow that you could be focused on. How do you prioritize? How do you think about where you want to start, where the most opportunity is? Yeah, how do you think about where to look first?
Yeah, I will be drumming this beat. This entire session is like, first of all, it's all about quality, right? And we really want to make sure that we are focusing on the quality of the hire. And so obviously from like a tactical standpoint, it's going to be, there's no perfect answer. It depends on that pipeline. And so areas that we've really focused on is like number one, top of funnel is how do we increase the volume of folks faster? And then also number
Mhm.
two is how do we make our interview process more efficient? It doesn't really matter if you're getting a ton of people through the process if they're not getting hired. And if their time to fill is really long, if you're spending and wasting a ton of hours interviewing, if you are also just like getting to the end and not closing. And so how do you make sure that you are optimizing at those different pieces for different roles? So I would dig in and I would want to understand, okay, like, are we having an issue of not enough people? Are we having an issue that we are not getting people through the process? And then how do we optimize through that? And we've actually used Bright Hire for this, Teddy. So can
Oh,
you talk
cool.
about this a little bit as well, later on in the process?
Cool. I want to dig in one click deeper, then Chris, I'll hand it to you with this similar question. But yeah, so you're talking about like the approach and the focus depends on like what you're seeing on the ground. How are you keeping tabs of like, you have a dashboard? Do you have a set of data that you're looking at? Like what's your cockpit look like that actually helps you understand, oh, I need to focus here versus there?
Yeah, so there's two things. So I have a head of talent dashboard that I'm looking at pretty much like every other day. I'm looking at medium time to fill, I'm looking at time in pipeline, I'm looking at application review to accept. I actually have my dashboard up right now in front of me. I'm looking at offer acceptance rate. We also have a CEO offer approval. So I'm also looking at that. What percentage are we getting approved?
Uh-huh.
If there's anything that we need to tweak, it's typically never at the end of the process. Any reason that
Yeah.
we get declined or any reason that we get pushback is earlier on in the process. So what do we need to do? Do we need to calibrate with hiring managers earlier on? Do we have the right interview panel? Those are the types of questions. It also goes back to recruiter scorecard. So we are tracking this for every recruiter as well. And we want to
Oh, wow.
understand, like, okay, what are their metrics? Their time to fill, their median time in pipeline, their offer acceptance rate. I'm looking at the percentage pass through rate from their on sites to offer as well. Is like, do we have the right calibration at every step of the process?
That's a quite sophisticated amount of data to be looking at for a 24-person team. Did you build this internally? Are you using like a vendor partner to help you put a dashboard like this together? Like, how, what do you actually use?
Yeah, so A, using Gem dashboard, so that's been really
Cool.
helpful. And B, we've hired Curtis Sweden, who is our data analyst. And he is here helping me build these dashboards so they're not manual. He's going to be building something in Hex, and he is really going to be helping us elevate how we use data.
Cool. And this is always a topic of conversation, like where are we on the maturity curve of our data and understand what we, understanding our pipeline and, oh, my data is not clean. How do I build it? So maybe we'll come back to this, but it seems like you made an impressive amount of progress on this so far. Chris, what about you? I mean, you've seen like at massive scale, Google, like machine running, you've seen like, hectic startup life. Are there commonalities that you've seen in those operating environments that bring together like where you would want to prioritize your focus in terms of driving efficiency, or does it really context dependent? I'm curious what you've learned operating in such different environments.
Yeah, I think the commonality is starting it at the very, very highest level with what is most important for the business right at that moment. What is seriously, what is the high impact going to be? Like, do we
Yeah.
need sales? Do we need a specific area in engineering? Um, Whatever we're spending our time on, like it doesn't do me a bunch of good to ship out a high number of hires that just can, like, let's say it's all the lowest hanging fruit or all the easiest roles to fill. That might look good for, say, numbers, but but it's actually not what's going to help the business succeed. So very
Mm,
high level starting, okay, what is most important? So I'm always looking to understand, okay, what are the P zeros? Like what is critical for the business? And a P zero to me is work that we are doing that we will drop other things to do.
mm,
There might be, that means that maybe there's a P2 or a P3 role that we're just going to post and pray. And we're going to tell them, set expectations with the business. Hey, we're going to focus our time here because this is what you need. So that's the
mm,
commonality. Um, and I'll just add a point to agree with Amina. The second most efficient thing we can do as a talent team is to get the hires right.
mm,
So, and there's a lot about like in that box of what does it mean to get the hire right? Well, the hire should deliver results. They should do the work in the way that our company wants to do the work. So it's like, what do they do? How do they do it? So that quality of hire is, I think, something that we should take on as a burden in our own team. I probably used the wrong word there, but just as a responsibility on
yeah. You talked about the starting point being like really clarifying what the P zeros are, not just for your team, but for the business. And by necessity, that means that there are P ones and twos, but everybody thinks that their role is a P zero. So how have you built the right relationships and managed the conversation in order to actually get everybody aligned that like there are differentiated levels of prioritization or service across the roles that you're supporting so that you can go operate with like alignment and clarity? Like easy, hard tactics that you've seen work on that? I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that on this call.
well, the cheat code is if you're in the room. If you can be in the executive team, and you're there, you understand where the business is going, you understand what's most important, you know what they're struggling with. Um, so that's the ideal. If you can't get that, you're working through your people leader to get that information. And
Mm,
you're communicating clearly to them that, okay, this is information that I need to understand. Um, and even if you have that, you still might not get everything you need. So you might have two different areas of the business that are sort of competing for resources, your resources and the talent team. That's a meeting that I will broker. That's a meeting where I'll
mm,
sit down with the both of them and I'll say, okay, let's talk it through. Which are the actual top X number of roles that you need in your team in order to deliver this crucial thing to the business?
yeah.
And we'll just work it
And
through.
is there anything in your dashboarding and your tooling that's separating like how we're doing on like our critical roles versus less critical roles, or are you treating them all the same? How are you thinking about that in terms
No,
of the
we
data?
actually do identify all the roles in their priorities. So the
Yeah,
P0 through P3. And then what I like to do in the dashboarding is have a week over week understanding of what's hauning on each of those roles. What was the
fascinating. Yeah,
progress we made? Like is the recruiter rolling up their end of week progress report? How did that go? Oh, there was a sales kickoff that week and we didn't do any interviews? Okay, well, that needs to be in the change log. That needs to be something that
yeah,
business understands at a high level. It cuts back on a lot of finger pointing.
yeah.
The manager
Oh, and
says,
what about
okay,
you?
Uh, I would agree with Chris. It's actually interesting, Chris, that you brought this up. I was just having this conversation with our head of recruiting operations yesterday. Our numbers look great, but where are we actually on with our hotspots? And how are we
Mm,
making progress on our hotspots? So similar to what you said, Chris. So we do a couple of things. It's not perfect. We're still working towards like an actual clean North Star, but we have a weekly, what we call the rundown, where we are looking at all of our hotspots. And from an HR business partner and talent standpoint, we're aligning it as one. How is the entire org doing? Because it's not just hiring and it's not just like current employees. You have to look at it as a whole. The other piece is
mm,
like we need to look at like that org's growth. So are we taking attrition into consideration as well? Are we making sure that we're not losing more people than we're hiring? And if we are, what does that look like? And so it's not a perfect place right now, but it is certainly that is a hot topic and something that we're discussing weekly. And what I've asked our head of recruiting operations, Viet and Curtis, to do is like we do need to build a dashboard that's specific to our hotspots. We currently right now are looking at those pipelines over anything else. And then how are we making
mm.
meaningful progress every single week? And I
Super
do think
helpful.
it's the head of talent's job to make sure that you're going back to the business and really keeping them updated on the hotspots, because that's going to be the piece
Mm,
that's going to hurt the business the most if you don't make meaningful progress. And Chris, to your point, is like we have to reassess resources and put them in
mm.
your resources have to be deployed on the right areas.
Super helpful. So we hit on prioritization a little bit, but both of you touched on like top of funnel as one area where there's opportunities to drive efficiency and productivity. I'm curious if you would define like what are the biggest problems that you see, and maybe they present in different ways, but when you think about the top of the funnel, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced historically? And then we can talk about some of the tactics you've put in place to actually drive efficiency and productivity. I'll stay with you for now.
So I always like to say this. Vercel is the hottest startup that not everybody knows about. And so we have different pipeline problems. On the R&D side, people know us. We are a developer brand. Obviously, we can do a lot better, but people have heard of Vercel. They know who Vercel is. So our issue there is less about do we have a ton of pipeline? Do people know us? It's more about how do we find the top 5%? And typically top 5%, they're not actively looking. They may not even have, the typical like LinkedIn profile that you would be looking for. How do you actually leverage the tools that you're using? We're very active on X. We're very active on
Mm,
GitHub. So using those types of tools. On the go-to-market side, people don't know us as much. And so one of the things that we need to do is not only like we need to focus on employer brand. We need to really tune
mm,
network. Something Chris and I were talking about earlier before is like I really focus on it's not just about referrals, but it's also about their external network too. So we really think about like the whole network effect. How are you asking people who are the best people you know? How are you understanding where you're plugged in? Who are the best sellers? Who are the best leaders? Who are the best marketers? Who understand really technical products? That's an area that we're continuously like really driving down. We're not great actually on inbound. And we have
mm,
a lot of inbound applications. We're leveraging Gem right now for their inbound tool, but we could be a lot better. And we focus a lot more on our sourcing and our referrals channels.
mm. Chris, what about you? Again, some things are like there's nothing new under the sun. Like we have too many applicants or we have not enough, or basically the two sides of the spectrum in terms of top of funnel challenges. But have they presented differently at a kind of massive scale versus startups in your context?
Yeah, well, I mean, Amina has it right. I mean, there you either you have one of those two problems. Like you either have too many applicants or not enough. But you should be optimizing both for developing passive candidates. You should also optimize for the candidates that are applying, that are interested in your brand. So you want to create the best of both worlds there. So just a couple brand points. If you're maximizing your active candidates, what does your careers page look like? Does it kind of open the doors and the windows into what it's like to work there? Do you talk about like your most important values and actually take a stand on the cultural values that your company wants to have the entire workforce work within? It's not going to be for everybody, and that's
Yeah.
okay. So that's what it kind of means taking a stand there. The second part, how do you write? How are you writing your job postings? It like
Hmm,
if we think about the downside of some of the AI tools, everybody's gonna sound the same at some point in the
hmm,
future. Everyone is using the same AI models. Every messages, it's all gonna look and sound the same. Replies, like AI could be talking to AI at some point. So I'm always telling my team, like, okay, create your V1, write the
Yeah.
JD with it. Now let's separate the job posting, the advertisement, and write it as such. Make it
Hmm.
fun, make it sound like a human, write it as a letter to your future employee. So these are the types of things that we've already gotten positive feedback on at Chainguard. That the managers are like, hey, could you write the job posting in that fun way? I really liked that.
Nice, I like that. Um, you mentioned for your R&D and engineering roles, well known. So you've got more of the challenge of like, you got a lot of inbound coming in, but you get really creative. You mentioned X and GitHub to really source. A lot of teams get stuck in the trap of like, I have so many inbound applicants, I don't have the time to source. So I'm curious how you set the right expectations for your team to not get caught in that trap, to actually reserve the time to do this creative work, building pipelines kind of actively. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, for example, your X strategy. I think like the folks on the, you know, on the webinar would love to know, what does it look like for a recruiter to be like successfully active on X, to recruit on X? Like what do the tactics look like? What are they doing? How are they spending their time? That's like a really interesting one that I'd love to learn more about. But yeah, how do you create the time when you've got all that inbound flow? And then, what do some of these more creative strategies really look like?
Yeah. So I'm gonna say there's no perfect answer, right? And we're still figuring all of these things out. It's like every week it's figuring different pieces out. So I'll break
Yeah.
that up into different pieces. Right now, we've actually made an intentional decision to focus on referrals and sourcing. So we
Mm,
unfortunately have a lot of inbound applications that we're not getting through. And the reason we made that intentional effort is we're gonna open this role and we want to go and find the best people that we can go find, and we're gonna go out
hmm.
and search. Now, some recruiters who have some more bandwidth are looking through inbound. We're leveraging Gem, but it's not perfect. And actually, one of the areas of feedback that I've gone back to the recruiting team is we're not using inbound enough or at all. We actually are sourcing
Mm,
people that applied and we didn't see them because they're like stuck in this applications of thousands and thousands of applications. So one of the
yep.
things we are actually investing in is we're likely going to hire an inbound recruiter to just focus on all of our inbound applications,
Oh,
get
fascinating.
get through everything, leverage Gem, make sure that we are not dropping the ball on this very important channel that we're not leveraging enough. But we
Yeah.
found a lot of success through our network and through sourcing as well. So those were channels that we really wanted to double down. This is more on the engineering side. Different roles have different we use inbound differently for different roles. And
Mm.
in terms of X, I'm not an expert, so I will give credit to the recruiters on our team. But what I will say is our CEO is very involved in X. Like, he's a
Mm.
very active poster. He has a lot of following. So the first step is actually like keeping track of his posts and who are the people who are engaged and who are the people who are commenting. And
I
he
love that.
has like a huge network and he passes a lot of people over to me. We have a lot of folks on our R&D side, especially who are pretty active on X. And because of that, it creates a lot more community. Now our recruiters are starting to leverage it a lot more. They're using it for sourcing. They're figuring out the right people to follow, following their posts. It's definitely not time efficient because we haven't figured it out just yet, but it is a channel that we have found, especially in the developer community, with really great talent.
Yeah. I mean, if finding the right candidates at the top of the funnel saves a ton of time cycling through interviews and screens, and like maybe that inefficiency at the top of the funnel drives actually a ton of efficiency through the entire process from a systemic perspective. I guess that's what you'd hope. Um, there's a question on GitHub strategy too. I don't know if you have a perspective on how your team is using GitHub. Is it like a similar approach? They're like, your senior execs are very active, your recruiters are following who they're following. Like, how are they engaging in that community?
Yeah, and we have, and again, I'm not deep in this, so happy to
Yeah.
answer questions offline and get more answers.
Yeah,
But our head of recruiting operations has built out this really cool functionality of how to search through GitHub based off of what you're looking for. And so I know some of the recruiters are using that.
really cool. Um, Chris, I'm shifting gears to you. So we talked about kind of top of the funnel, prioritizing, maybe making trade-offs and sacrifices, recognizing that like you can't do everything all at once. Uh, but one of the promises of AI is like it can deliver kind of like better and faster, hopefully, Maybe it still needs the human touch, but I'm curious, like what you've been using AI for. What have you been experimenting with in terms of you personally or your team, and various parts of the workflow to kind of create efficiency, speed things up, and hopefully not sacrifice quality.
Yeah. I think table stakes these days is what I mentioned earlier. It's about we should never have to start with that blank sheet of paper. We should be able to create a V1 job description, which turns into the job posting, which turns into the hiring plan, which allows us to structure. So those steps, I think, are table stakes. Using annotation, interview annotation, like that's been a game changer ever since Bright Hire came around, and like so, it. I think a lot of talent leaders have had, we'll just say, challenges getting feedback entered by their interviewers. So you get nothing with annotation. Like that should never happen again. Um, I think there's still even the summarization of those interviews, and the recruiter needs to take a step then to go in and say, okay, is this the summary? Is this a quality interview? How is the interview being conducted? So anyway, so that's sort of the V1, and I think you can get with very little lift, you can get an immediate impact.
Mm. I don't know, what about you? You mentioned like you're really focused on driving efficiency through the interview process. Are you using AI there? Are there other parts of the process where you're applying AI in ways that feel like it's creating a lot of lift?
Yeah, so I mean, we are Bright Hire users. I don't want to repeat too much of what Chris said, but Teddy, thank you. I do think Bright Hire has helped us significantly for the same reasons of note summarization, but it also helps us with like enablement and debriefs, and
Mhm.
to make sure that actually helps you become more efficient because you're able to make decisions faster and you have the context.
Mm,
The other ways that the recruiting team is using AI is I want to give a shout out to Viet, our head of recruiting operations. So Vercel uses Glean, and Viet has set a channel called Ask RecOps, and that has actually
mm,
made things a lot more efficient for the recruiting operations team. It's almost like a support ticket, and they're tier one. And you go in and you ask, and it's tied back to Glean, and it'll give you the answers of like, okay, I'm looking for an interview kit. I'm looking for answers about this policy or immigration or what country we're in or what state we're in. And that has made their team time more efficient. We also are big users of our own product, a V0. And so I think two areas, Vercel has a work product interview that we require for all candidates to do. It will vary
mm.
depending on whatever role you're in, but something that we're shifting to a lot more is using V0 for that. And it gives our candidates an opportunity to use our product. And it also
Oh,
showcases
that's cool.
us their work. And so it's
Yeah.
not for all candidates just yet, but that's where we definitely want to get to.
That's really cool. If I could come back to one of the use cases you described, using BrightHire for around debriefs, like driving decision making, getting to those decisions faster. Can you talk about a little bit like what that workflow looks like? Like what did it look like before, and what does it look like now that you're bringing technology into the interview process and into debriefs?
Yeah. So number one, we're not using this for all debriefs. So it's typically when we need to go back and have an answer. So we're using the note taking for debriefs where
Hmm.
we have people actually writing their feedback. They still need to summarize though. So that's feedback that I give people. You can't just write, like you can't just like put it in your AI notes. I actually need to understand what you think. But it allows us to go into debriefs actually having feedback and being able to drive those conversations. The toughest debriefs is when you just don't, you're going in blind. You're like, I have no idea. Is this leaning yes? Is this leaning no? Are we excited? Are we not? So that has helped us be more efficient. Number two, there have been times where we've had to go back and we've had to go watch interviews because people were on the cusp or people were like, I actually don't know. Or we had a different perspective. And so we've gone back and
Mm,
we've made hiring decisions to move forward because we were able to have Bright Hire, or we've made decisions actually we're not going to move forward because they didn't show up the way that we expected. And so
yeah,
that has allowed us to have the right information and the right data that we need.
super helpful. Chris, I remember we were catching up yesterday. You were talking about like trying to keep tabs on like comp data as an example. It'd be helpful to hear more about like what you're thinking about in terms of the use of AI in a context like that.
Yeah, I think maybe 4 or 5 different times in my career, I've tried to get the team to keep track of real-time data of compensation. So it's like, okay, what is the market telling us? And whether we hire a candidate or not, I'd like my team collecting what is this candidate looking for? what other offers do they have? What was I was really excited about in this is another secret Bright Hire feature, is that it does actually capture that compensation information for you, and it can put it into a place where you're now able to store it, to look at it, to analyze it. And I don't have to ask my team one at a time every single time that they speak to a candidate to enter some compensation information into a sheet.
Yeah.
The way that typically works in practice is that people do it for a week or two and then it kind of just trails off. Whereas if the tool is just automatically collecting it, now I can get the data at scale to actually move the needle.
Super helpful. I thought your framing at the very outset of this conversation was like very strong and very apt, which is like speed doesn't matter if you're sacrificing quality. Like quality is where we start. And so we're talking about the use of AI and uses of technology in various parts of the process to try to drive speed and efficiency. But we want to make sure we're not having a negative impact on candidate experience, candidate perception, the quality bar. Um, do you measure that in any way? Like, as you introduce new process or new automations, are you keeping tabs in some way to ensure like, hey, we're still delivering a great candidate experience, it's still personalized, it's still to where we need it to be white glove or high touch?
Uh, we're not great about candidate surveys, so will admit that. It's something that we want to focus on. We haven't prioritized that as much. So Glassdoor is definitely somewhere that we pay attention to, and we do get feedback on our interviews, and we've gotten feedback that we need to move faster. And so it's something that we are keeping track of. We have a pretty rigorous process at Vercel, and we that's by design, and we are okay with
Mm,
that. But we need to be able to move faster because we don't want to lose really competitive candidates. The other piece is we are staying close to our candidates throughout the entire process and asking for feedback. So it's less about a
mm,
survey, but more of like, okay, tell us how things are going. What feedback do you have, and how do we incorporate that? We also, so this is more of like internal employees of also tying back to quality of hire. It's like less so about the interview process, but we have our 90-day performance review. So Vercel does a 90-day performance review once you've
mm.
started. And we actually use this data to go back and see, did we interview correctly? Did we
Oh
tap
wow.
into the right areas? Now, again, like none of this is perfect. We are still continuously tweaking, but like we have used that to be able to see, okay, maybe we need to tweak the interview process to be able to focus on different skill sets that we thought we needed, or we need to double down on what we're doing. So that helps with the quality piece. That also goes back to making sure that we're being efficient in the way that we're interviewing.
What does that 90-day review look like? Like how deep is it? Is it, a couple questions? Is it like a true performance review? Is it tied to the competencies that you were assessing for in the interview process? Like practically speaking, what's getting done in that kind of 90-day review?
Yeah, so it is it's a couple of questions, and then it ties back to our calibration matrix that we do for full performance reviews. So we
Mm,
do scores from 1 through 4, you're scoring your employee 1 through 4, and then you break it down into the different areas. We have I'm forgetting all of them. I think it's mastery, it's impact, collaboration, and then I'm forgetting the last one. And then we write notes. So it is pretty like in
it's
depth.
pretty thorough.
It is pretty thorough, and, like, we need to be consistent, right? We're trying to be consistent across all managers. Our HRBP team is doing a great job in leading that, but, like, it really is helpful. It's helpful for a number of reasons. It's helpful for the hiring manager to understand, like, did I hire correctly? Am I setting this person up for
Yeah.
success correctly? Am I onboarding them well? We also believe, like, quality of hire, I think all talent leaders are trying to figure out, what does quality of hire mean? How do you define it? What does it look like? One way that we think is, like, how quickly can someone ramp? How quickly are they
Mm,
able to drive impact and ship? Vercel is a very large shipping, like we care a lot about shipping,
you gotta go.
and whatever that may be, right? And so that's a way to track it. It's also an opportunity for the employee to give their own self-assessment and to align.
Mm,
Like, are you aligned with your hiring manager on how you're doing? This is a good opportunity to have that communication, and then it goes back to recruiting as well. Did we hire right? And how does this go
yeah.
back to how we continue our hiring practices?
Fascinating. And so you've taken learnings from that and actually retooled parts of your assessment or interview or sourcing practice based on what you've learned.
Yeah. And we do the same with calibrations for performance reviews. We've
Really
recently
cool.
just had to change one of our interviews based off of calibrations.
Wow. Fascinating. Chris, have you seen similar experiences, whether Google or Chainguard or others, in terms of like closing the loop and kind of reevaluating what you're doing kind of at the top of the process, get to
Absolutely.
different
Yeah.
outcomes?
I mean, I think one of the projects I'm most proud of it was running a quality of hire study. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago at one of the companies I worked for. And so it was a matter of very simply looking at, first of all, attrition. Like you can kind
Hmm.
of pull out like non-regretted attrition. You can look at kind of the downside, like where are we missing? What we couldn't do at that time, though, is AI with the advent of AI, like AI can now analyze all this unstructured data. It
Yeah.
can look at every single interview that occurred for, say, that group of candidates that attrited out of the company because they were mishires. Um,
Hmm.
the flip side, you can look at, okay, who are the strongest performers? And so you don't actually need to like, this isn't a program you need to start today and then just do it going forward. You can take a look back for the last year right now
Yeah.
or the last 2 years and just quickly get signal on, say, attrition, on top performers, and then tie back, like Amina is saying, to the interview feedback. We can look at, okay, where are the strongest interviewers? Who's actually on target? Which interviewers do we need to support and work with? We can also learn a lot by looking at a large amount of data by what sources did those hires come from, the best hires come from. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, I think there's a huge opportunity here, not only to do this in real time, like Amina's talking about, but take a look back at what you did for the last year or two.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, as I'm thinking about like some of the examples you all have shared, there are these like very discrete point solutions, applications of AI, writing job descriptions, for example, right, where like we can create material efficiency and time savings in this particular discrete task. And then there's these like systemic approaches, like we can actually use AI to synthesize and learn from all of our interviews and our hiring outcomes, what we need to do differently so that we can be way more efficient. We don't like hire the wrong people and have to go do it all again. And like some balance of those two approaches feels like it's ultimately going to unlock a lot of capacity for teams. Yeah. It's a team sport. It's not just a talent team. Like you have mentioned, hiring managers and HRBPs and people leaders. Um, what role are you asking your hiring managers to play in all of this in terms of driving efficiency? How are you enabling them to play the right roles? I'm curious about what your team is doing, kind of looking outwards to that population to help them like be the best partners to you all. Chris, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, at a high level, this is another area where the partnership with the leadership team of the company is so important because if we're empowering them, they are also accountable. So one of the best things that we can do is make every hiring manager accountable to the quality of hires that they make.
Hmm.
So starting there, this is actually a performance expectation that a manager should have is that they hire well, that the people they bring in are successful. So I think just that's where you have to start. That's the foundation, and then you can actually now start to look at, okay, are we structuring the process for them? Are we helping them with building out some of the things that would typically hold up a role opening, such as, okay, hiring manager, write me a job description. Okay, now who's the panel? Who's gonna do that? Let's align that panel. Let's make sure everybody's on the same page that you are. Um, to Amina's earlier point around rubrics, what does good look like? What does great look like? Are we holding a bar that says, okay, well, if the person is below good, maybe they can do the job, maybe they kind of get a C grade on the interview, that we're actually okay passing on that person because we're not bringing in a strong hire. So
Hmm.
that's where I like to start, is just at that very, very top level.
I don't know, your hiring manager population must have grown a lot over the last couple of years. What have been the most important things that you've done with that population, whether it related to AI or otherwise, to kind of enable them, set them up for success, and enable your team to continue to be very efficient through the process?
Yeah, enablement is a hot topic for us at Vercel right now. It's something that we are prioritizing and we're focusing on. So I think where I feel very lucky, especially at Vercel, is that talent is a number one priority across the business. Our CEO approves all offers. So if he's going to be putting in the time and the effort to review every single person that we're bringing in, that shows a level of importance of like how, like who we're bringing and what that talent is. And so
Yeah.
backtracking that into getting hiring managers to understand what is our bar and what does it mean to be able to go out and find that bar. Again, I think I've said this multiple times today. Like all of this is a work in progress. I did a roadshow when I joined Vercel last year, and to really set the stage of like what does quality mean, what does the bar at Vercel mean, what are the most important characteristics, what does success look like, how do you make a pitch for your candidate? Like that was a lot of the enablement. Now it's been a long
Mm,
time, so we are now redoing that, and we're doing essentially a roadshow with all of our execs and saying, okay, what does like who are your top performers? Why are they your top performers? And what are we trying to continuously bring into Vercel? And then how do we go and find that? How do we make sure hiring managers are equipped? I do believe that, so, and this isn't the case for everybody, but like hiring managers I've seen have like almost two modes. One mode is like, I love recruiting. I know this is the most important thing that I do. And the other is like, this is the bane of my existence. Like, I have to do
mm,
this. It's like the necessary evil that I need to do in order for me to hit my goals. The goal that I would like to have for all hiring managers that I work with eventually is that like you understand that this is probably the most important thing that you do is like
mm,
org building is you are as strong as the people on your team. If you have really, really high goals and you need to achieve them and you need to do it fast, you need to hire people who can operate at the level that you need to operate, and like that's going to be your biggest unlock. And so this goes
mm,
back to, similar to what Chris said, this goes back to your performance, and it's in addition to the people that you hire, it's the performance of your team. And like
mhm.
will only be better when you hire better people.
Totally. I'm going to open it up for questions in a bit, but one other on one other question, which is in terms of the ecosystem. We talked about kind of the talent team, the importance of like recruiting ops and having the right person in that seat, setting the right expectations for hiring managers. But you both work with vendors. I mean, you mentioned Bright Hire's partner, Gem is a partner. I'm sure there are others in your stack. Uh, and again, like the promise should be those partners are helping you unlock efficiency, capability, the latest technology to help you kind of grow and stretch. What expectations do you set for the external partners that you work with? What does a great partnership look like? What are you looking for from those partners? Uh, and like, how should the folks on the line here be thinking about like, how should I evaluate a partner to understand if they're going to like be with me on this journey, unlocking AI, creating efficiency, and this is like going to be long term. Chris, again, you've worked in like very different contexts, so I'm curious what that looks like at big scale and then and scale up. But yeah, curious your reflections on that.
Yeah, so expectations wise, first of all, I don't want to create new problems by introducing maybe a short-term fix for something else. And say what I mean by that, for example, I mean we're recruiting internationally. So is the tool that we are using causing problems by entering bias by the model itself? Is there an issue with, say, recording interviews that in GDPR, like you have to make sure that you are getting rid of those recordings after a certain period of time, which, by the way, BrightHire does, thankfully. So I don't want to introduce new problems. I think I also don't want AI talking to AI. So ultimately, what I want, my expectation for the tools is to add capability without causing fundamental problems for our business.
Mm,
So when I start to look at some of the sourcing tools, I get excited about sourcing enrichment and being able to really take that level of deep research to the next level through some enablement.
mm,
Um, I get excited about being able to do a whole bunch of automated tasks, such as you can actually set up now like an automated sourcer. So, and if you're in a sourcing role, you're like, okay, well, I'm working on this role right now on LinkedIn, but I also have this sourcing agent working over here that is pulling up a list of every single person that has worked at X company from this year to this other year, that worked in the sales. So I'm looking for added capability without big
mm.
problems.
I don't know. What about you? Do you have a rubric or a framework or just a set of expectations that you have when you think about bringing external partners in to help create efficiency and scale and kind of get you to the bleeding edge on technology?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is, and we're doing this, Vercel does this with our customers too, and it feels really basic, but it's helpful, is like a shared Slack channel to be able to give
Mm,
feedback, to be able to ask questions. I'm not a huge fan of like, let's just have like a monthly check-in or a quarterly check-in. Let's actually talk when we need to be able to get something done. I think Jem has done a great job with this, is like we have a shared Slack channel, and we're always giving them feedback or we're asking them questions, and they're very communicative and they are pretty fast. I think Vercel is still in the sweet spot where we are like early, like startup-y, but then like thinking about, we're not quite enterprise yet. We don't want to have like so much, you know, we need to be able to move fast. And so we're looking at our vendors to be able to help us move fast. And I'm also looking at vendors who take feedback fast and implement it fast. It's like,
yeah,
and that's actually why I think like earlier stage companies, especially in the AI space, why they're accelerating so much is like you have these like engineers who are like, okay, give me feedback. Okay, great. I'm going to go and ship that right away. Obviously, not all companies can do that as you get bigger, but that is something that we really take into consideration if we're exploring newer products, is like how quickly are you going to take the feedback that I give you, ship it, and make it so that it's high quality for us to use.
super helpful. So yeah, tight communication, tight feedback loops, like a fast shipping cycle. And then Chris, from your perspective, don't create problems, just solve them. There's a couple of questions in the chat here, and we can go in a whole bunch of different directions. Um, but there was a couple questions around like we're starting really small. Like we're not actually at the scale that Chainguard or Vercel is at. We're a team of two or three. That can feel very overwhelming. Uh, what scales down to that scale? Like where would you start? Do you have advice for folks who are kind of going on this journey and thinking about how to build an operation, starting with, just one, two, three folks on the team?
Well, so I've done this a couple of times where I'm the first recruiter in the door, and it is a fun journey, to say the least. Um, and so what Amina said is like a first step, like kind of the roadshow listening tour. Like you're going out there, you're figuring out what are the biggest problems in the business. So that is like the high level place to start. Um, from the tools perspective, I think I've said it twice already about where you can start small. Like it is, you shouldn't get the figure out, okay, for this particular role, what are the core competencies? Um, if you use the like an MOC methodology for how you write your job descriptions, starting with, okay, what's the mission for the role? What are the kind of 3, 6, and 12-month milestones for what that person will be delivering? And then number 3, the competencies. So MO and C. The competencies now create your interview questions, and that's how you build a structured interview plan. So even if you are starting small and you're one or two, like if you're doing things the same way, if you're building a structure, and it shouldn't be hard to do now using some simple tools, you are able to get data over time. Because otherwise, you are just kind of, you're playing whack-a-mole. You don't know if your process is working, if it's actually helping or not. So doing things the same way over time gives you data, and now you can analyze it and figure out if what you're doing is working.
Super helpful. Anything to add on that in terms of kind of building from the ground up?
Uh, Two things that come to mind. So I remember when I joined High Touch and we were 20 employees and I was the first person, the advice that I got was you have to really focus on the pain that the founders are feeling. Don't try to like get ahead too high, especially if you're joining in your early stage and you're like one or two people. Don't try to like go 1 or 2 years in advance. Right now, focus on the pain. And Teddy, obviously you're a founder. I'm sure that that resonates. Is like we really, really need to solve for that pain first, and then we can go to the next few steps. And that really helped my mental
Yep.
model. The other thing that I think like we really implemented at all the companies that I've been at is that hiring managers and leaders who don't hire a ton don't understand the importance of upfront work. And we
Mm,
still are battling that and setting the stage with that. But like you actually save time and you save money and you save effort if you do the upfront work. And so really understand, what is it that you are looking for? What does this person need to do? What are your ideal people? What's your strategy? Versus like getting on a call, you're doing 15 minutes and like, let's go like scour the world for this person. It's like, no, let's actually take a step back, because what ends up happening is you spend a ton of time interviewing, you spend a ton of time sourcing, you're not getting the hits, you're getting people through the process. What happened? And like then it's really frustrating for everybody else. And sometimes you kind of have to have some of those iterations until everybody involved is like, okay, you're right. Like we should have done more upfront work here.
I, I feel like people think there's the promise that AI makes that upfront work like 100 times easier to do. You can like push a button and automate it. True, not true? Like, what do you think? Is there an opportunity to make that upfront work like less heavy so that more people do it? Or is it like really, no, we just got to put in the time?
So I definitely think it helps. So where it helps, so for example, like I've been running a leadership search here at Vercel, and how it helped me was understanding those roles. Like, and you
Mm,
also need to know how to prompt. So I think that's another piece. I'm still getting better at it, but like, how do I prompt, for example, a chat GPT to teach me about all these different roles and how this function and how this leader operates in a world like ours. And that helps me
mm,
educate. And I can go back to the leader and ask the right questions. I can put together, we also like Vercel's, we're trying to set the stage of like every role should be like an exec search where the recruiter is coming in with a white glove experience and having a lot of
mm,
knowledge about those roles. It's something that we're working towards. And what I want our team to do is like come in with that education. I think AI helps with that.
mm.
Come in with like a draft of a JD or an interview plan. You should know your business well enough and who the interviewers are to be able to make those recommendations. Give your hiring manager an opportunity to start at 75% or 80% than at
Totally.
0%. And that helps unlock it. But you still need to
Yes.
do the work. You still need to understand what it is about the business.
Super helpful. Chris, one of the things that comes up when you introduce new technologies is you create problems because they don't talk to each other. So like that clean data set that you had becomes not clean, or the simple workflow that you had becomes not that simple anymore. There was a question in the chat around this. Like there's so many AI products on the market and they can all assist with like various steps. Like how do you prioritize where you actually want to invest, and how do you not over engineer it with like all these integrations and turn out with a Frankenstein? And maybe some problems never go away, they just permutate. But I'm curious how you're thinking about that right now, especially given the ability to like build your own stuff. I mean, I think there's like this really interesting, very cool move for TA teams to like be building their own AI tools. How should they be thinking about that in the context of, well, will it scale? Will it create problems that were unintended, et cetera? I'm really curious how you think about like the composition of the stack.
Yeah, okay. So let's take that last part first, which is how are we like if we're thinking about what tools are we building for ourselves? There's already several webinars out there around how you build an agent, how you build your own AI agent. So one of the first things to do around that is think about, okay, well, how can it really, in some ways, it's like automating a form. It is like, okay, for a typical job description or an intake, I need to ask these series of questions. Well, now I can just have an AI agent ask that. And then it can put it in, structure it for me. It can create that very quickly, and I'm not even there. So I think that there are some places that you can quickly get, I don't know what the percentage is, to 50% or 80%. Um, so that's one area. I was smiling when you were asking that question because as far as like data and that part of the equation, we can actually create a lot of problems for ourselves. I'm dealing with a situation now where I've got finance data in one bucket, I've got recruiting data in another bucket, and then each functional area has their bucket of data, and none of those buckets talk, and none of them agree. So, so now the question is, okay, how do we start with a single source of truth? How do we pouring all of our information into one place, and then everybody draws from it? So that's a problem I'm working on right now. And then the last bit I'll say is like even for like let's say you're using Glean, or let's say you're trying to figure out how to organize all of our docs. Um, how are you structuring that information so you're cutting down on hallucinations? So let's say you
Mm,
have four versions of the same doc that exist somewhere in Google Docs at your company, and the agent is trying to go and find the most relevant one. So have you properly
yeah.
archived the older versions? Do you have all of the most current versions listed in a specific folder that you tell the agent to go search for first? So data, the problem with data has always been garbage in, garbage out. With AI, we need to help it. We need to create the foundational organization of our data in such a way that we're pointing it in the right place.
Mm. Um, okay, one last question, which I think is really fascinating. Neil had this in the chat. Uh, if you have KPIs for your recruiters, which you both obviously do, has AI changed those in any way, either in kind or in magnitude? Like people talk about, like, I don't know, the solo entrepreneur who vibe codes his way to selling an $80 million company in 6 months. That's like a whole previously unthinkable, impossible level of productivity. Like, are you setting previously impossible, unthinkable levels of productivity targets for your recruiters now that they have access to AI? Or are you stepwise moving there? Like, yeah, how is AI changing your KPIs, if at all, in kind or in magnitude?
Is that me or Amina?
I don't know, both of you, either one.
Amina, do you want to give it a shot first?
Uh, the honest answer is like not yet.
Not
So,
yet.
we're tracking. And I think like so much of that has been happening over the last 6 to 9 months. And I do think like my goal, I always want to have really aggressive goals. And to make sure that we have the right North Star. Where I'm focusing actually on the aggressive goal is like the pass through rates in between each stage.
Mm,
And that is where I really want us to like focus on and get more
mm,
efficient. I think in top of funnel sourcing, sure, but I don't want us to become like a huge volume game and we're just like going out there.
yeah.
Chris and I were talking about this earlier. Like with the age of AI, now anybody can send a message and it all sounds the
All
same.
right.
So how are you actually personalized? So it goes back to everything is about quality. Like, do you have the quality of pipeline? Do you have the quality of messaging? Do you have the quality of funnel? And I do think that's the piece. Now, ideally, AI is going to make your recruiters more efficient. They have to do less of the administrative work, less of the research, less of the pieces, and they can really double down and focus on like driving the right people forward. But I'm not ready to say like, yes, we've done that, and these are the results.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, what do you think about this?
Yeah, a couple of high-level points. One, I have a higher degree of expectations when it comes to there should never be an excuse of, well, we didn't open that role because the manager didn't have the job description ready. Like that's gone away. That's gone. Uh, and I think Amina actually also has this with her team around we're adding an expectation with our recruiters that they're responsible for the quality of the hires. That's not
Mm,
something that was typically done before. And so I think we just have a lot more tools available now to really look at large amounts of unstructured data. We can help our managers. We could be way better consultants to them. So front end of the process, like we should never be
mm,
slow starting. Back end of the
yeah.
process, we should be advising with all the data that we now have access to.
Super helpful. There's like 19 more questions we could dive into, but we're at time, so I'll have to schedule another one of these. But Amina and Chris, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Super fascinating, the moment in time that we're like living and working in. And if you want to catch the recording, it'll be over at Bright Hire. There are a bunch of questions that we'll collect and maybe send to you both, and we can answer them async. But to everybody on the panel, thank you to those who attended. Thanks for spending time with us today. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you might be. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Thank you.